We'll now move to item number 6. Senator McGuire, welcome. So this is item number 6, SB 643. Senator, please begin.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the distinguished committee. Grateful to be here today, and I want to start out by thanking the chairman for his dialogue and work on this bill. And I also would like to thank the committee staff for such an excellent and thorough staff report. Very grateful for all the time that you have put in. I believe it accurately highlights the urgent need for the legislature to act on the issue of medical marijuana, focusing on the impact of the unregulated industry, and makes excellent points about concerns with the lead agency we currently have identified in the bill, which would act as the point for statewide regulation. And will say, accept the chair's recommendation to be able to move those responsibilities out of the Department of Consumer Affairs, and I know the chair will have some items to speak to on that. Since the voters of California passed Prop 215 in 1996, medical marijuana cultivation and consumption has exploded, both here in the Golden State and around the country. Aside from local zoning regulations, this legal multi-billion-dollar industry is virtually unregulated in the state of California. For 2 decades now, the state has allowed this industry to grow, for the most part unchecked, and our communities, our environment, and the public's health has been severely damaged or is at risk. All of that said, I am a proponent of medical cannabis. The district that I represent grows 60% of all marijuana in this nation. But California can no longer sacrifice the public safety and environment for the growth of the industry. And while it's grown in the north, the bulk of the consumption and the cannabis is sold and consumed in Southern California. And I'd like to start out very briefly about how public safety has been challenged to respond to the issue of rogue marijuana growers and why we need regulation now and not wait for this crisis to grow. I'd like to start out with Trinity Pines in Post Mountain in the county of Trinity in northwest California. There are literally hundreds of grow sites on Post Mountain. Thousands of acres of forest have been cut illegally. Right now, CAL FIRE can't respond to this area without the sheriff's office, CHP, or armed personnel going in prior to the engines moving in. Trinity County has 9 total deputies. It's a county of about 15,000. If you were to flatten Trinity County and get rid of the Alps, it'd be the size of Texas. Their sheriff's office is overrun and outgunned. And just last year, those cultivators closed county roads and opened up a checkpoint for neighbors coming in and out. It's out of control. There are more unsolved murders in this rural county than some metropolitan areas. Eureka in the county of Humboldt has 6 times the violent crime rate. The mayor of Fort Bragg, Jerry Mello, was gunned down and murdered walking through a Mendocino County forest. It's out of control, and this legislature needs to advance, I would hope, this bill, and I appreciate your consideration. Another top crisis point is the environment. The current drought has not only made the urgency of this legislation more necessary than ever, because marijuana growers range from small family farm operations, many of whom have farmed for decades, that want to comply with state and local regulations, if we had state regulations, to violent international crime organizations that must be eliminated from the business. Entire watersheds have been dewatered. Waterways home to endangered fish species have been devastated with sediment and poisons. Marijuana grows are the #1 source of sediment and nutrient loads in Northern California rivers and streams. Rogue operators have clear-cut thousands of acres of forest illegally, both on public and private lands, without regard for the long-term impacts they are creating for neighboring landowners, downstream farms, or endangered species. They've dumped tens of thousands of pounds of illegal pesticides, rodenticides, and fertilizers into wilderness communities. They are also sucking our rivers and streams dry. 2014 was the first year in which the Eel and the Mattole rivers ran dry since we started keeping written record. According to the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the average marijuana plant uses 6 gallons of water per day. In Humboldt County alone, according to Sheriff Downey, there are 10,000 grow sites comprised of hundreds of thousands of plants. In one small watershed in Mendocino County, the Outlet Creek watershed, Fish and Wildlife officials estimate the legal diversions top 100,000 gallons per day, and this is a main trib to the Eel River. And I know that all of you are well aware of the regulations, permits, and certificates and other processes that farmers and ranchers have to go through when growing crops such as nuts or grapes or raising cattle and sheep. But right now there is no regulation or permits for marijuana farmers, and this isn't fair to anyone, and our state's forests are being sacrificed and rivers are literally running dry due to the state's impotent approach to regulating marijuana. And very quickly, Mr. Chair, I'd like to show you just 3 quick visuals of what I was describing. We're going to go to one more. So there we go. So right here is an example of what Jason has in his hand, this first one. I'm going to go to my left right here. This is your typical illegal cut. So what is currently happening are growers will go in, potentially get a 3-acre over-the-counter permit from CAL FIRE. Then they'll go and cut maybe 50 acres of forest land and clear cut it. And what happens, because these areas receive, or prior to our drought, used to receive a lot of rain, you would have whole hillsides slipping. And all of that sediment then goes into our streams and rivers. This is a second visual. So when you get closer, you're going to see these large greenhouses and ponds. These ponds are filled with fertilizers, and they're mixed. And a lot of times what growers will do, and I got to tell you, the majority of folks are responsible and they want regulation. But since we've seen organized crime take hold, it's out of control. So what they'll do is they'll dam a creek. They'll allow the creek to be able to build up in these ponds. And it's become so extreme, there are times where they'll fly bulldozers in the dead of night to be able to clear these lands. And then what happens is during the rainy season, or because these dams are shoddily built, they'll collapse. And all of that silt and nutrient load ends up in our rivers. This is the final. This is after a raid. So what you see is literally tons of garbage that is left in the middle of California forests. This is a rather tame raid, and what you don't see are the dead mammals, because they put rodenticides so that deer do not harvest or elk do not harvest on the marijuana, and all of this is left in our forests. There is no way to be able to clean any of this up. Thank you so much, sir. So I use that as just a visual to show some of the devastation. And again, responsible grower groups are working with us in the Regional Water Board to combat this situation and are eager to comply with the same standards that all other ag producers follow through. But we have to act. Another particular concern, Mr. Chair, is growing, and that is the issue of edibles. The edibles market is estimated to take up 30% of all current medical cannabis sales in California. These cookies, brownies, cakes, and other treats currently have no regulations and or guidelines to ensure safe and consistent ingredients and to make sure they stay out of the hands of those who are underage. And in fact, when we sat down with folks from Colorado who are regulating, that is a significant loophole in their law. Any other commercially produced baked goods must comply with environmental health laws that protect consumers both on the sanitary side of the house and on the ingredient side of the house. For example, how much cannabis should be placed into one baked good? There are no regulations. This industry is quasi-legal due to the Compassionate Use Act and other laws, and it's going to get bigger and more dangerous if we don't act now. On top of that, as your analysis points out from your very capable staff, the U.S. Justice Department has made it clear that it expects states who allow medical marijuana within its borders to have a robust system of regulation and enforcement or face federal involvement. Current state laws and local zoning regulations do not deal with the myriad of critical issues and concerns about cultivation, processing, transportation, edibles, testing prior to public consumption, content standards, prescribing, and sales that are critical to a safe and well-regulated industry. This bill is designated to specifically address these dangerous and concerning issues. It creates a statewide, comprehensive program overseeing the medical marijuana industry from general oversight, law enforcement, licensing, product content, and edibles, to marketing, taxing, transporting, zoning, and local control, resale, and labor regulation. This bill sets up rigorous standards for physicians who prescribe medical marijuana and establishes the Bureau of Medical Marijuana Regulation that will be responsible for establishing licensing standards, issuing licenses for cultivators, processing, manufacturers, storage facilities, distributors, transporters, and dispensaries. The Bureau will also certify laboratories that perform health and content testing of the products and promulgate regulations for the health and safety of industry workers. And finally, Mr. Chair, I'm going to very quickly go through the bullet points that we're specifically focusing on. One, this would ban indoor and outdoor commercial cultivation sites in areas zoned residential, which is a significant issue in many of our communities. Two, it requires that all medical marijuana grown, produced, distributed, prescribed, and sold in the state in California meet certified organic standards by January 1st, 2022. The reason for this is because of the significant amount of nutrients that are ending up in North Coast streams. It allows local governments to impose a tax via a referendum or fee on cultivation above the ultimate sales tax that we currently have now to help defray the expense of regulating the cultivation and processing of the commodity in their jurisdiction or enforcing local laws through the sheriff's office. This bill would not supersede provisions of Measure D as approved by the voters of the City of Los Angeles or any other measures that have been passed locally. Licenses would only be valid if both the state and the local jurisdiction approve the applications. All licensed locations and license information would be given to local law enforcement. The North Coast Regional Board is currently in the process of promulgating regulations that would create a three-tiered system for cultivator, grower, wastewater, and discharge permits that can serve as a statewide solution. A conditional use permit pursuant to this section shall be valid for 12 months. And this bill deals only with medical marijuana. It does nothing to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. We will not be taking a stand on this issue via this legislation. We believe California voters will be making this important decision soon enough. And I promise I'm almost done, and I apologize, Mr. Chair, as this is a pretty big one. And to specifically address the stated concerns about the oversight of this new agency, let me just say I wholeheartedly agree with the chair that the Department of Consumer Affairs is not the right place for this Bureau to end up. This committee has extensive experience with the DCA, and I respect your opinion and concerns. Where is the best place for this new Bureau? We have spent many months researching and talking to law enforcement, interest groups, cities and counties and legislatures, and while there is not universal consensus on where it should go, I believe we're close to resolving this issue, and I would ask for the committee's best advice on this specific item. And I'd also like to address the issue of a sunrise and the sunrise questionnaire. Obviously, this is a long and thorough process, and for good reason. Creating a new state agency should never be done lightly. However, given the lengthy timeline outlined in the staff report and the fact that I have only been part of this amazing institution since December, I would ask the committee's indulgence and allow us to pursue these questions while we move through the legislature. And I have to tell you, we can't wait to be able to adopt these regulations through the length of that process. Finally, we have intentionally advanced this bill without a sponsor. Our bottom line is this: we need to find a way to resolve the serious issues highlighted in this presentation that are facing this great state related to the issue of medical cannabis. As you all know, issues arose last session that kept bills relating to this subject from passing. I believe moving this legislation forward without a vested sponsor is the best way to achieve this. I believe that only a general consensus bill will be successful this year, and we'll be working hard with all involved to secure a bill that will protect the public safety, patients, cultivators, and our environment. And again, Mr. Chair, I apologize that I've gone on so long, and thank you for your indulgence along with the committee.
Thank you, Senator McGuire. Seeing no questions at this point, are there witnesses in support of this legislation? Please come forward, and if there are a number of people, then if you could line up, come on, feel free. Grab a seat here, and very good. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Dale Geringer. I'm the Director of California NORML, and I'm with the Coalition for Cannabis Policy Reform, and I was one of the co-sponsors of the Compassionate Use Act, Prop 215. We support the aims of this bill. Prop 215 really called on the legislature to implement a safe and affordable system of access many years ago, and it's unfortunately we haven't gotten around to it yet. But as we move into 2016, when there will be legalization on the ballot, I think it's important to have a framework for regulation of medical cannabis in place. That said, this is a very complicated issue. There are problems in this bill that need to be amended. There are some regulatory obstacles that will make it difficult to attract existing operators in unless they are fixed. But we've spoken to the author about these. They're aware of the problems and willing to work on them. And with the understanding that those amendments can be worked out, we're in support of this bill.
Very good, thank you. Others in support?
Mr. Chairman and members, Paul Smith on behalf of the Rural Counties Association, also on behalf of the California State Association of Counties. I will say right up front, we do not have a formal support position, but we are quite close. I just want to highlight a few of the concerns for counties and particularly cultivating counties. I'll start by saying that Senator McGuire's presentation was just spot on as it relates to the ground zero that members of RCRC and CSAC have, particularly on the North Coast. Just a couple thoughts to leave you with. I know time is short. First of all, the bill does set up a dual licensing structure, one where you obtain a state license and then a local license. That is not county's preferred method, and I've shared that with the senator's staff. But I'll say two things. If we are going to go down the route of a dual licensing structure, we believe we can work with it. We can find ways to make that structurally fit for counties. The other things that we are looking for that we've talked to the author's office about, again, is further strengthening local preemption, particularly as it relates to land use. Counties are not necessarily in the business of regulating background checks or edibles as they relate to environmental health. We're talking about basic land use restrictions. Senator McGuire's bill already speaks to a couple things, and we're grateful for that, but still more work needs to be done. We also need some work on the issue of county taxing authority. Senator McGuire hit that in his presentation for the reasons I think are spot on, but again, a little bit of work on that. The last two is strengthening the licensing structure itself, kind of reining in the collective model, if not abolishing it. And finally, some more environmental enforcement. His bill, again, goes a long way to discuss it. We think there are some improvements that need to be made. We're going to sit down with Senator McGuire all the way through this process, and we believe we can get a good bill and hopefully worthy of county support.
Very good, thank you. Others in support? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Duncan, the California Director of Americans for Safe Access. Our position is support if amended, and we're looking forward to working with the author on the bill. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Yes, sir.
Tim Cremodi on behalf of the League of California Cities. We do not have a formal position on the bill at this time, but we are comfortable with its broad strokes since it is based on SB 1262, which we co-sponsored last year with the police chiefs. We share the county's concerns with respect to the need to improve language on local land use authority as well as taxation.
Very good, thank you. Yes, sir.
Nate Bradley with the California Cannabis Industry Association. We don't have a formal position on this bill yet. We are looking forward to working with the author's office on this bill. Our main concern being is the lack of state enforcement. We are concerned that if enforcement is put on local governments, it'll continue on the confusing enforcement patchwork we've seen, and you'll see numerous towns ban instead of create their own enforcement schemes.
Good, thank you very much. Yes.
Danielle Lynch on behalf of California Trout in support.
Very good, thank you.
Hezekiah Allen, Emerald Growers Association, statewide association of medical cannabis farmers, support in concept. Excited to continue working with the author. They've done a great job so far. Thank you all. Encouraged not to vote.
Thank you for coming this afternoon. Appreciate it. Others in support? Those in opposition? Please come forward. You have to, if you'd like to sit here. Good
Hello,
afternoon.
I'm Lynette Davies with Crusaders for Patients' Rights, and we do support good regulations that are going to be put down, and we do have the need for it. But one of the things I wanted to point out is many of the pictures that you just saw, those are from criminals, and those are already against the law. And if we don't implement the laws we already have on the books, making new laws really doesn't do any good. So let's implement what we have, and we can get those bad people out of those forests, because the majority of people that are cultivating our medicine are law-abiding citizens. And I do have some concerns on this because I'm only looking from the patient basis on this. One of the things is it did ban cultivation in residential areas, and yet on the other side of it, it did say that patients have the right to cultivate. So I want to be sure that patients do not lose their right to cultivate their own medication. The other thing it does make a new crime. It makes doctors that actually makes them a misdemeanor for doctors that are giving out information to maybe a dispensary or to another area to get their medication, especially if there's somebody that they know. I can understand that it would be wrong, it's unethical, but I don't think it's criminal. And I think it's very important that when you have doctors that have put in many, many years of expertise and time in coming into a new industry, that we support our doctors and not make it harder for them to give out recommendations by scaring them. So rather than a misdemeanor, I would say they should probably have maybe something, some kind of neglect from, or negligence from the medical board. The other thing I wanted to point out is that at this time, Proposition 215 made every patient has the right to cultivate. In the bill, it made cultivation a privilege. There is a huge difference within the law when you have privileges and when you have rights. So I was just looking at a little bit different clarification or maybe even wording on something like that. All the facilities needed on this have to be on a website. Now, if you're cultivating, to have your information on a website that could be open to the general public could cause people to have theft issues or, the criminal activity because you pinpointed where those farms are. And I do believe that it was 18105 that it said all facilities needed to be on the website. And I did worry about people that are cultivating being targeted for crimes through using a state base. Tracking transportation and inventory. I can understand how necessary it is. I want to be able to fall back. If you have a product, I have a dispensary here in Sacramento. I want you to be able to track my medicine all the way back to the farm, but I don't want to overregulate to the point where you've got to have separate entities having all these separate licenses that are renewed yearly. I think this is an agriculture product. We already have agriculture rules and regulations out there. I think we need to implement them and add cannabis into it. I love the whole idea of how you have set this up. I just think we need to critique it a little bit, and so I am opposed until amended. But I really look forward to seeing something like this come through because I think it's necessary. I just don't want to overregulate and cause a burden on my patients that have cancer, multiple sclerosis, diseases, and don't have the funds. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Others in opposition?
Yes, I'm Kimberly Cargile with a therapeutic alternative. We're a local medical marijuana dispensary. And we are for regulations. We would like to see regulations. It's been way too long with an unregulated industry, so thank you very much for bringing this bill forward. We oppose it until amended, so we just see a few problems with it based on the patient side. So we would like to see maybe an exemption for patients to be able to grow a few plants in their house, in their yard. We're not talking about commercial cultivation. We would like to see very strict regulations on that side. But I also do share the same concerns that Lynette has shared and want to point out that this law will not fix those major problems we saw with those pictures of organized crime. Those people are not trying to follow the law no matter what. So we want to write a law that the local dispensaries, the local cultivators, patients in California who want to follow the law can follow. So we would also like to see land use left up to local government and local government very involved in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your testimony. Others in opposition? Seeing no one, Senator Hernandez, questions?
Yeah, I'd like to commend the author for bringing this forward, especially with the comments about, it's non-sponsored. Since I've been in the legislature, we've seen a number of them, whether it's Correa or Amiano, and there never just seems to be any consensus. My concern that I mentioned to you, and I think you're going to address it, is where is it housed? And I think Department of Consumer Affairs is, I don't think the appropriate place, but I commend the chair for willing to work with you, maybe even splitting it up. We've talked about different agencies that take different parts of it, but in concept, I'm support. I will be voting on the bill, and I appreciate everything that you've done in its effort.
Thank you, Senator Hernandez. Senator Block.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator McGuire, thank you for the very thorough presentation, and you've made it clear that regulation is necessary, and as the bill moves through the process, we're early on now, there will be, I'm sure, fine-tuning of the regulation. My concern, and I'll support the bill today, isn't with the regulation, it's with the enforcement. I think it's kind of unrealistic to expect that with current resources, we'll be able to enforce even more regulation. We can't enforce laws already on the books. So the question is, where do we get those resources? And that's really a matter, I guess, for the Appropriations Committee, not for this committee. So I'll be supporting it now, but hope you find resources to finance it.
Good. Thank you, Senator Block. Other questions? Yes, Senator Mendoza.
Senator McGuire, I'm glad that you brought this bill forward. I think it's having it be part of your district and knowing your district very well. It's you come across very knowledgeable on it. And as a representative of Southern California, I'm sure my constituents would be very happy to make sure they have safe regulations on the books for them to consume medical marijuana. So with that, I will be supporting your bill. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Jackson?
I'm kind of curious, going forward, there's talk of an initiative, and I suspect there are people here who are working on an initiative for 2016 on this issue. How does your bill interface with that initiative?
No, thank you, through the chair. Thank you so much, Senator. So one of the reasons why we're not taking a stance on recreational use is because we believe that voters will have an opportunity potentially in 2016 to be able to express their opinion on the issue. And the reason why we are focused on the issue of medical is because we have, as a state, never placed the appropriate rules and regulations on the medical side. And quite frankly, the way this will work with potential initiative that may look at recreational use is putting in the regulatory framework as we advance. So as we've seen, at times, voter initiatives can be a challenge to be able to get the right regulatory framework correct. And we can't wait till 2016 to be able to advance this because the impacts on our communities and our environment and the public's health are happening now. So what we would hope is, one, rules and regulations now for medical. Two, it helps establish the regulatory framework if and when a 2016 initiative is advanced.
And thank you for that answer. I would like to suggest, because if we have a constitutional amendment, it will trump any statutory legislation on this issue. I would hope that in your further deliberations that you will be working with those folks who envision expanding the rights to use medical marijuana to a recreational purpose. And in that regard, as we look at what's happened in states where they have legalized it, there's a real concern about the intensity of the product. And there might be something that, again, if we are going to try to avoid the mistakes of others who have moved more quickly than we, that might be something that should be considered. I represent an area where we have national forests and we have a lot of marijuana growing. Again, the photos you showed really reflect a scofflaw approach. Organized crime, I'm not sure what we do with them. Certainly, if we were to be able to create some major enforcement mechanism, but I know that the resources and frankly, I think probably some of the political will isn't there. These are very rough people who are fairly well armed, I'm told. So I would just simply ask you to consider on a parallel track because from what I gather, we will be seeing an initiative, and it would be, I think, to everyone's best interest to try to anticipate what some of those issues are that are going to be brought forward at that time for a constitutional or an initiative that will trump what we do here. So this is a huge task, and I'll support it with a watchful eye going forward, but just wanted to share those thoughts with you.
Thank you, through the chair.
Of course.
Thank you so much, Senator, and I think you're absolutely right. We have actually sat down with some of the authors and started the discussions and sharing our concerns. You're absolutely right related to the intensity of the product, and that is the loophole, quite frankly, in Colorado. And we brought 7 counties together, what we'll call the impact counties that see the most cultivation in the state. And we actually had individuals from Colorado come speak with boards of supervisors and county administrators, exactly what you had just mentioned. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. And that is going to be a major focus for us moving forward.
Great. Thank you, Senator Jackson, for the question. Senator McGuire, this is, I think, it's timely, and sharing Senator Hernandez's concern, we've seen numerous bills coming forward, and every time they stumble, there's a problem. It may be related to who was sponsoring the bill at the time and the, I don't want to say paranoia, but the concern around the issue and who's bringing what forward in the legislation. So I think this, you're in a perfect position representing the area because no one knows it better. So I'm really happy, and thanks for understanding the committees and my concerns and our concerns about the Department of Consumer Affairs. It really would be difficult. And the issue of a sunrise hearing, the idea of really looking at the stakeholders, and it sounds as if you've been doing that over time, bringing people together to look at the issues, to try and see and define where the best place for a regulatory, for regulating the medicinal marijuana and establishing the framework possibly for going forward if recreational is agreed to and adopted by the people. So I think this is a good first step, and we want to wish you all the best in doing that if it gets out of this committee today. So congratulations for that. Yes, Senator Bates, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to the senator for taking this step. In Orange County, we have had a myriad of issues, and we did approve the medical marijuana card, the issuance of it 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not going to support it today, and we had that conversation. I think the League of Cities kind of focused on what would be my issue, the land use and the taxing authority. And I know that you're working, to narrow some of that. And but I'm really very appreciative of the steps you're taking because it's long overdue, long overdue. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank you. And we also would certainly appreciate is when if this does pass today, it will go back to the Committee on Rules. And at that point, you may consider and hopefully would remove or amend the bill to remove the Department of Consumer Affairs as the lead agency in that and establishing a bureau in that. I think that would be a good choice.
And to the chair, that is my commitment to you and to this committee is that we will be making those amendments at our next committee as well. And then, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, if it's okay to clarify, I know some folks had mentioned that wanting to be able to respect 215. This legislation respects 215, and it does not go into any focus of what a patient can have at a county or a city level. All this bill would do is having commercial grows in residential zone neighborhoods. So it respects 215 and both dried pounds of cannabis as well as plants based off of local ordinance. And the other piece is that we are not looking at publishing any data on a website. It would just be with code enforcement and law enforcement. And I will tell you the biggest issue with an ag product, my own personal opinion, it should be regulated like an ag product. But as long as it's a felony misdemeanor or a federal misdemeanor or a federal felony, California Department of Food and Ag cannot regulate as an agricultural product. So that would need to happen if and when a legalization initiative were to move forward. And Mr. Chair, my final piece is we will be hosting a summit, but we welcome any of you with all of the parties to be able to discuss next steps if it does make it through committee today.
Very good. Thank you, Senator McGuire. I'll consider that your close. Is there a motion to move this bill to do pass to the Senate Committee on Rules? Motion by Senator Hernandez. Please call the roll.
Motion is due pass and be referred to Rules Committee. Hill?
Aye.
Hill, aye. Bates?
Not voting.
Berryhill? Block?
Aye.
Block, aye. Galgiani? Hernandez?
Aye.
Hernandez, aye. Jackson?
Aye.
Jackson, aye. Mendoza?
Aye.
Mendoza, aye. Wachowski?
Aye.
Wachowski, aye.
6. The bill has 6 votes. It should get out with that, but we'll hold the roll open for absent members. Thank you, Senator McGuire. Appreciate it very much. Great presentation.